Welcome, friends, to Breakfast in the Ruins, a Michael Moorcock flavoured podcast. On this show, Simon Perrins, artist and co-host of Can I Pod with Madness, is back, as we return to the saga of Corum, the prince in the scarlet robe, arguably Moorcock's most nuanced fantasy hero, as he seeks vengeance against the wicked Mabden that slaughtered his family and took his hand and eye. A stiff task at the best of times, but made more complex, as ever, in the tribulations of the eternal champion, by the machinations of the higher powers of chaos. So, along with his love Rowena, mysterious companion Jari, and his winged cat Whiskers, and assisted by the eldritch powers of the Eye of Rin and the Hand of Quill, two impossibly ancient and powerful gods, and, having previously dealt with the Knight of the Swords Ariok, Corum ventures into the realm of the Queen of the Swords to seek assistance to save his land, Liu Manesh, from the vicious Mabden menace and their brutal allies. We have, of course, talked about the Knight of the Swords previously, and you can find the first part of our delve into this book in our back catalogue. It did take us a while to get this episode up and running for a variety of reasons, and even when we did get to it, it seemed that the forces of chaos were determined to interfere with our technology and break our will, but we got there in the end. Up yours, Mabelode. So pour yourself a low-grade snakebite and head through the portal to join Simon and me as we complete our journey into the realm of the Queen of the Swords. All right, finally. Well, finally, we're back in Derry and Toms with Simon Perrins, and good Lord, what a palaver we've had actually getting together to do this. I think 5 separate cancellations. And then, when we finally get here, technology problems as well. Anyway, all mysterious clicks have disappeared. The sound of the seashore washing, or the sea washing against the shore, has gone, and we're finally back and ready to hit the road with Queen of the Swords Part 2. Welcome back, Simon.
The hearing of a distant ocean does seem very Moorcock, though, doesn't it?
It does in a way.
Like,
yeah.
You can't see where the ocean is, but you can hear it.
Yeah, it's probably some giant dude wading through the ocean, Time Bandit style.
Yeah, wading.
Yeah. Bloody wading gods. Now then, it has been a while since we did book 1, and we did have a quick conversation. We decided that because we've waited so long, we should do books 2 and 3 and actually get this mother finished. Otherwise, we'll be here till 2025. So that's what we're going to do. But meanwhile, you are absolutely bashing out episodes of Can I Pod with Madness at a frankly industrial rate. What have you been talking about recently?
Well, we just recorded a Christmas episode, which was based on the December 1983 edition of Kerrang. I think that's going out tomorrow, which is not very Christmassy, but we just talked about Christmas music and just what we're doing for Christmas. And I've got I've got the Christmas '88 issue to get into for this week, the next recording. But yeah, it's all the same. It's all the same as we're mostly doing Kerrang and Metal Hammer from 1987 to 88, 89. We've occasionally delved into like slightly outside that period. We've done one from 91. We've done, I think, a couple from 84. Yeah, and I wanted to do one recently because it just felt like we were just covering this. Like every week, it's a story about Motley Crue cancelling a tour. Like, I think that's all they did in the late 80s was just have a tour planned and it's cancel for whatever reason, death and drunkenness and debauchery. I'm sort of trying to get across that we're not experts on metal at all. We've got an interest and we've got a love of the music, but we don't know most of the stuff we're talking about. We don't really know, so we do sort of drift off into sort of endless, waffle and just general sort of nostalgic stuff. But yeah, I think we're enjoying it so far.
Well, I've got to say, the enjoyment that you share doing the podcast shines through because it's always funny and the rapport you both have is great. And also, well, naturally you would have because you're a couple, so you would hope that would be the case.
You'd hope.
But yeah, you're absolute love of Motley Crue does also shine through. I think the Crew are probably the most mentioned band, even more so than Maiden. Which maybe think, at times, I don't know.
Yeah,
You should rebadge as Pod at the Devil or Podding in the Boys' Room or something. No, don't rebadge.
Possibly.
I'm just joking.
Possibly.
But no, congratulations, because you've already breezed through your 25th episode not so long ago, and now you're getting your Christmas special out of the way as well.
The 25th is the next one we're recording, yeah.
Right.
So, or maybe, but we might have split one into two, maybe. But yeah, we're still enjoying it, and yeah, it's just, I mean, we've had a few just things getting in the way, but because we're only releasing them every 2 weeks, you hopefully don't see the joins so much.
Yeah.
No, it's great. I'm finding it. I think I'm our biggest fan because I listen back when I'm editing, and then I listen back anyway to sort of remind myself of what I'm talking about. And I find myself, I mean, I shouldn't say this, should I? I find myself laughing at it. And then when we're recording and we're talking about previous episodes, I'm going, oh, do you remember in episode 4 we talked about, and she's like, no, what are you talking about? It's like, oh yeah, I've listened to this several times now.
Yeah. Yeah. It's just, to be fair, it's the same when I have Phil on.
Just exploring the world of podcasting.
Yeah. When I have Phil on and I say, you do recall that we talked about X when we talked about The Eternal Champion Book 2, and she just looks vacant at me and shakes her head. I'm like, oh yeah, you're not the crushing nerd I am. I forgot. I forgot you're not the crushing nerd I am. Number 2, you've got a life and you think about other things. And number 3, I listen to this.
Things.
Yeah, I listen to this back when I edit it, and so Funnily enough, when you talk about laughing back at it when you're editing, I haven't edited it properly yet, but last weekend Loz was over and we came up with a really lazy and stupid concept for our birthday stroke Christmas episode, and I got it together. I got the sound levels balanced. I did some normalization and compression, like all the good audio guys do, who actually know what the fuck it means. I don't really. I just know it makes it sound slightly better. And I did have a few chuckles at just how fucking stupid it was. So yeah, I share that. And also, we drank some truly, truly horrific beer. So this evening, I've actually decided, plus it's also a school night, I've decided to stay off the beer, and I'm drinking Daffy's Mulberry Gin. It's got a very pretty little label. And I've got to say, I'm not a massive...
Oh, very nice.
Yeah, I'm not a massive gin guy. I do like a bit of gin, but I tend to prefer just straightforward dry gins like Hayman's or Tanqueray or, Cromwell from Aldi. They're my kind of gin. And I tend to avoid flavoured gins. But a few years ago, Phil got me Daffy's gooseberry gin, and it was fantastic. Just a dry gin with a bitter hint of gooseberry. Absolutely amazing. But it's really, really hard to find now, apparently, and she can't find it anymore. So she got me this mulberry gin. It's pretty fantastic. So I'm going to drink some gin this evening to settle myself down after our technical problems in terms of getting started and see if we can get through this. Now, with it being a school night, are you drinking a tipple this evening?
I bought myself a Thistley Cross. I just looked for whatever I had. And I think I've had this before. I think it's pretty nice, as a cider.
I actually like Thistley Cross. I think it's a good one. We've never fallen down the cider trap on this until... I suppose we got close to it, because, no spoilers, but the last drink that Loz pulled out of the magic hat of Pat Ferrick was Snake and Black. Now, canned, pre-prepared Snakebite and Black. No spoilers, it was fucking awful. It was really, really bad. And it went down the sink. It was bloody awful.
Yeah. You weren't a... You weren't a cider and black drinker in your teenage days, like most people seem to be.
Well, I was very much a snakebite drinker, not a cider and black or a snakebite and black drinker. So back in the day when we didn't have a lot of money, we would be in a situation when we were on the dole where we thought, right, we could afford a $5 deal, or we could afford maybe 6 cans of Orangy Boom and a 2-litre bottle of Carbon White. So depending on what mood we were in, we would get a $5 deal and do it in buckets, as the old expression. Not going to go into detail. Or we would do Snakebite made with Carbon White and Orangy Boom, and then drink them as fast as possible because if we took our time, we probably wouldn't get drunk enough. So my experiences with snakebite were pretty low grade, let's say. But yes, I did enjoy snakebite from time to time. And frankly, if you're going to get drunk on carbon white, or what were some of the other ones? There was carbon white, graphite. They were all themed around carbon, stroke diamond, stroke something or other. But there was 2 litre bottles of graphite.
That sounds rough.
Yeah, carbon white was pretty bad. I think it was £1.29 for 2 litres, and it was 8.2%. And if you got 6 cans of Orangiboom and there was 2 of you could make Orangiboom snakebite with carbon white and just drink it fast, and hopefully get slightly drunk out of it or feel vaguely sick. But these are the depths that you plumb when you're skint in the old country. So.
When I was in college, a bargain booze opened really near to our house, and they used to sell Zeppelin cider.
Zeppelin!
And Zeppelin cider was so rough. I mean, it sounded, cool, Zeppelin, but I did not go back to that regularly. It was pretty horrible.
What I wouldn't give.
Paint thinners.
What I wouldn't give to get my hands on some Zeppelin cider. That's going to have to be a task now. It's going to have to be some kind of quest for when we finally do Warlord of the Air. I've got to drink Zeppelin cider when we do it. The closest I've ever come is there's a Jägermeister knockoff called Messerschmitt. which I've seen in bargain shops like B&M Bargains and Home Bargains and places like that. Yeah, Messerschmitt. Yeah. Which,
blimey.
Dear, oh dear. Anyway, so before we crack on to Queen of the Swords Part 2, you've also been horror-conning.
Yeah, indeed. It's sort of quite a regular, well, it has been a regular thing in the past. Yeah, we had a couple of years of not going to anything at all. But yeah, the main one we've been to is For the Love of Horror in Manchester. And yeah, we always have a top time there. For some reason, horror fans are just absolutely lovely, which you wouldn't think. But I think just fans of any kind, if because none of these events are that cheap. I think people sort of make the decision to go. They spend money, and they spend money on the tickets and the travel and the meeting celebrities and things. And so most people just seem so determined to have a good time that it's just a pleasure to be around. Even though it's like Freddy Krueger or someone with weeping sores and or you stood in a toilet next to Satan. Everyone just seems to just have a whale of a time. The first one we went to was kind of a Lost Boys reunion, and my partner is the biggest Lost Boys fan I've ever met. Yeah, they had the vast majority of the cast who do these things were there. They didn't have so many this year, but they had a fair few of them this year, and they had Kiefer Sutherland there this year. Although he was there the first year we went, but very briefly, and he just did some signings, and he wasn't on any of the panels. But this time he was there the whole weekend, and he was on panels and stuff. Yeah, and the director and the stars of Blair Witch Project were there, and I didn't realize Terrifier was such a popular franchise. Terrifier fans are everywhere. And I watched the first one, I hated it, and didn't watch any of the others. But yeah, I mean, even the stuff you've not seen or you're not interested in, I still sort of find it fascinating listening to the talks and stuff. And yeah, it's a little bit more relaxing if you're not getting as many autographs and photos as we were the first year, because it was pretty hectic, because you had a 15-minute window here and another 15-minute window there. But yeah, every other time we've been there, it's been a bit more of a relax. It's just a sort of day out, and you just hang out and get your photo taken with some gigantic mutant thing that you don't. It's probably from some franchise you've never heard of, but it's he looks cool,
Yeah.
And it's on the same day as Thought Bubble, or the same weekend as Thought Bubble, because I've not been to Thought Bubble in a couple of years, but I hadn't quite realised. But you were at Thought Bubble this year, right?
Yeah, it's really kind of irritating that Thought Bubble clashes with quite a number of things, not least of which, of course, is Grog Meat. It clashes with Grog Meat as well. So I've not managed to get to Grog Meat for several years. So I think last time I did Grog Meat was probably pre-pandemic. And Phil came over and stayed in Manchester as well. We had a really good time. And, I did the gaming during the day and then we went out for dinner in the evening. It was really good. But yeah, for whatever reason, Thought Bubble always just impacts on quite a few different things. And we've just settled into a routine of going to Thought Bubble with our friends. And we got an Airbnb in Harrogate. So just spent 3 or 4 days there just eating and drinking and having a nice time. We bumped into Tom Murphy and his wife Jane of Colossive Press. Managed to have a face-to-face and a meet-up with him for the first time, which was really, really lovely. I always drop by and see John Wagner, of course. Although on this occasion, I think John had probably sold up most of his stuff on day 3 because he was in the pub by about 3:30. And what else? I think this year I didn't spend much money on art or comics, but I ended up buying 2 role-playing games that I saw there. One called Rune Cairn with a Goran Gligovic cover, and another one, which I've got to say, this is really terrible. It's still in the tote bag, and I bought the 150 quid GM pack with all the different books because they looked absolutely lovely. It's a horror role-playing game, and I've got it in a nice tote bag, and I still haven't opened it and looked at it, and I've completely forgotten what it was called. So I spent far too much money on stuff that will probably go on a shelf or go in a corner, but it doesn't matter because I always enjoy stuff like that. But the problem with this is, from going to our SFX weekenders, I've got original art by people like Simon Davis and Boo Cook that I've picked up over the years, and they're all still in bags in the loft. I've never done anything with them. Yeah. They're just up there, and so I've ruled out spending any more money on original art until we've got a house 3 times bigger than this one, and we can actually do something with it. The only things I've ever got framed are my Clint Langley, Elric pictures. Yeah, which are pretty special. And the day will come when I'm able to actually pull all this stuff out. I've got Conan by Will Simpson. I've got Solomon Kane. Yeah, I've got Solomon Kane by Will Simpson and Boo Cook. Just from going to these events, getting drunk, and saying to them, do you fancy doing a sketch of X? I've got an original Glenn Fabry of Slough Egg drinking a can of Stella.
Nice.
Yeah, but they're just up there, and they're still in the bags that I brought them home, and I've never been able to do anything with them. So I really need to pull my finger out and do something with them, and stop spending money on stuff until I can do something sensible with it. Yeah, but this is the joy of these things.
In the meantime, you can just have a day or a weekend. You just go up there, you get everything down, and take pictures. Yeah. I think we all need to see these things.
Yeah, I've got some lovely stuff. I've got the original painted centre spread of Slane artwork by Simon Davis. I've got on board. I've got his original his original Slane concept art that he did as a sketch, just to agree with Pat Mills how they would get the look right. Oh yeah. Anyway, I'm going to stop banging on about it. But yes, at some point I will get it all out and take pictures and share them, just so it's actually doing something. Yeah. Anyway, we've already gone off on a colossal digression, and we haven't even got started yet. But what are we here to do? We're here to do Queen of the Swords Part 2, of course. And where's my book? I've managed to bury my book under rejected microphones from when I was trying to get rid of that clicking. But yes, Book 2. Book 2 is titled In Which Prince Corum and his companions gain the further enmity of chaos and experience a strange new form of sorcery. Now, I am wondering at this point, should we recap Book 1? Or should we just trust that people who are going to listen to a podcast called Queen of the Swords Part 2 might have listened to Queen of the Swords Part 1?
I'd hope they'll have at least read the book, so they should have some memory of the general thrust of what's going on.
Yeah, I think if they haven't read the book,
and if not, they can just listen to the podcast.
Yeah, if they haven't read the book, pause this, go back and listen to Queen of the Swords Part 1. But in short, at the end of Queen of the Swords Part 1, where Corum, his companion Jaria Connell, Jari's cat Whiskers, and his good lady Rowena have travelled across the land of Luamanesh because it's under threat from the forces of chaos. Chaos cults are rising up in the towns and villages, encouraging people to cast off their allegiance to law and Lord Arkin, and they finally get to the biggest city of all, where the king is under pressure because chaos forces are landing on the coast, the pony tribes and the barbarians. And probably the best part of that other than all of the travelogue stuff when they're travelling through these small towns and seeing the creeping influence of chaos, there's, of course, the fantastic bit where Whiskers gets a chapter all to himself and goes on an adventure to a massive chaos temple. But all good stuff. And they end up getting sent by Lord Arkin to a different realm, the realm of Zionbarg, the Queen of the Swords, one of the 3 sword rulers. Corum, of course, has already dispatched Ariok, the Knight of the Swords, in order to reach the City of the Pyramid. And this is effectively where we kick off. They've passed through the gateway, they're in this realm of chaos, looking for the City of the Pyramid. I think that pretty much covers it, doesn't it?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Straight away, psychedelic travelogue quest mode. We have this sense that, or they have this sense that it's a very strange world. The sun doesn't move in the sky, everything's a little bit weird, everything's very static. But we, first of all, find that Corum has to roll on the Psychedelic Chaos Wilderness Random Encounter table and gets some annoying birds of the avian variety. That, if I just check my notes here, cackle sardonically. So we have some sardonically cackling chaos birds as the first encounter. Now, after attacking, but getting a bit nonplussed that one of their number gets strangled by the hand of Quill, they back off and there's a bit of a standoff for a bit. Now, of course, we've got to talk about the hand of Quill and the eye of Rin. I will get this the right way around. It's not the eye of Rill and the hand of Quim. It is the hand of Quill and the eye of Rin. And Corum sorts them out anyway with his eye of Rin. Now, Corum's magic eye and hand, they didn't really get any use in the first book, did they? So what is the deal with Corum's magic items gifted to him by the dead gods?
Well, I think in that first book, it was just sort of revealed as this sort of horrific thing where he had this ability to kind of look into the realm, like the worst sort of hellish realm you can imagine, and beckon his stricken enemies to aid him. I think he does that quite a lot in this one. He's seeming to. It does seem to lose a little bit of its shock value because he's doing. I mean, he's complaining about it while he's doing it. The line, it is. Relina says, "What is this foulness?" And he goes, "It's the foulness that aids us." It's almost like, look, shut up! I'm sorting this thing out. I don't like it, but he does. Yeah, it does sort of get used quite a lot in this section.
So that's the eye. The eye. He takes his eye patch off. He looks into a cave where the defeated victims of his last little army of the dead are there waiting, and then the hand of Quill beckons them to come out, and he sets them upon whatever the current adversary is. And it's like every time he uses them, he just stores up ammo for the next time he uses them. So every time they get killed, they refresh the ammo. Now, this becomes a bit of a problem when we find out some more of the rules of the eye. But then we've got the hand, which, okay, the hand beckons these creatures through. But what else does the hand do? It occasionally leaps into action and strangles somebody. It's pretty random, the hand, as to when it does and doesn't get involved in the action.
Yeah, it's, I mean, oftentimes just when the plot requires it, it will just kind of spring into life and do something unspeakable. But he doesn't have a lot of control over it. Although I'll admit, I have read forward. I've read the third book, and there is a little bit of explanation as to. I mean, it might have been after the fact. He might have just sort of. He might not have been thinking that far in advance when he wrote this, but there's some sort of reasons given for some of the incidents a little bit later on. The first time he uses the hand and the eye in this book, you've got the added shock value of it's his own people, because in the previous book it was the Vadarg in the Burning Lands, I believe. So he has to go through that whole torment again, which is another great bit of writing of how tortured he is, because he thinks his entire people have been wiped out. Then he meets some more, and immediately they're all killed. And then he has to watch them as zombies. It wasn't bad enough that he's slain his own people again. Not like Elric, he didn't choose to do it. He did it sort of by accident. But other than that, I think going forward, it does become a bit. The shock value is a bit lessened, and it's like, use the hand and the eye, may as well go for it. It's pretty powerful. Get us out of this.
Yeah, the birds do get dispatched by these effectively undead Varag from the last book, and yeah, you're right. The degree to which the characters experience peril is slightly undermined somewhat by the frequent use of this magic item, this device. But we'll work through that as we go, because the first thing they've got to do is Moorcock pulls out one of his old favourite tools, which is the something of something. Something mundane of something mundane to combine them to make it something slightly sinister. So we have the Lake of Voices. And in chapter 2, well, the Lake of Voices, it's one of those situations where you think, oh, the Lake of Voices, that sounds pretty terrifying. This is going to be hard to cross. But there's a boat just conveniently waiting for them by the side. And the Lake of, whilst crossing the Lake of Voices is a pretty rubbish affair and a bit taxing, they do cross it. And thanks to sort of inadvertently tricking the voice of the Lake of Voices into silencing all of the doomed souls that make it such a pain in the ass to navigate. And they get to the other side. And the voice of the Lake of Voices goes, yeah, I'll get you next time. Oh, no, I won't, because I've lost all my souls and I've got to start all over again. And then they move on.
I really like that sequence because it reminded me of a fighting fantasy book. It's like one of the sorcery books by Steve Jackson. You know, he obviously had to test his luck a few times. That little vignette of being on the lake and, you know, the kind of tortured souls of the people who were drowned in the lake, that's just pure, like, early fighting fantasy books. Like, when they started, they were a little bit more sort of slightly sort of twisted fairy tale, and they got a bit more sort of they get more sort of Forgotten Realms, Greyhawk, you know, like a well thought out fantasy world later on. But those early ones, you would just get these odd little things that made no relation to the rest of the story, and were just kind of like obviously cool, weird little things that Steve Jackson and Ian Livingstone had in their D&D games, just decided to throw into these books. And the Lake of Voices really had the feel of that, at least this time when I read it.
Yeah. I don't think I got through all the sorcery books. I remember Care City Port of Traps.
Yeah.
And was there the Caverns of Calt? Yeah.
Oh,
I think I hadn't played those two.
Caverns of Calte was Lone Wolf. But yeah, Lone Wolf and Sorcery were the two continuing series.
Right. What was the second sorcery book?
Well, the first was the Shamu Tante Hills. The second was Kare City Port of Traps.
Ah!
The third was the Seven Serpents,
right.
And the fourth was the Crown of Kings, and they were like a long story, beautifully illustrated by John Blanche. They had a real atmosphere to them that I think a lot of the others didn't have. And you can get them all there's like a sort of digital version of them now, and they've got all added content. You get like the iPad or a smartphone version. But I would heartily recommend those if you want to dip back into the fighting fantasy books from the 80s with a little bit of added content. And there's something about the sorcery books. They just had a stranger feel to them. They're like the interesting names, and you know, keeping John Blanche as the illustrator throughout the 4 books, but. You know, the kind of flying chaos birds and the kind of grim landscape. It really reminded me of the 3rd book, The Seven Serpents. And they must have been really steeped in their Moorcock. Because, you know, obviously Games Workshop went on to pretty much rib everything from everything he ever wrote, didn't they?
Yeah, and there's a lot of stuff in here, isn't there, as well? Which is... I mean, I think we commented it in part 1.
Yeah.
We comment on it in part 1 that there's lots and lots of stuff that makes it into things like the Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay Europe setting.
Yeah.
And there's lots more stuff in here. But, I mean, even, you know, moving on to the next part, it's like this guy turns up, doesn't he, who is Noreg Dan, the king without a country. And that's like... all right, Magic Paul can play this week. Let's have a new character. Oh, who's it going to be? It's Noreg Dan, the king without a country. This is the right way to introduce characters for me. I know in gaming, people write extensive backgrounds for characters and come up with really intricate things. For me, I'm Jeff Ward. I was the melon head of Camden. Let's adventure. And then, you know, if I can't play for more than one session, I'm dead, or I'll just get sent off on a side quest, and I'll just go and sit in the pub for 2 weeks to see if I can play again. That's good gaming for me.
Yeah.
That's how I want these things to work.
I like that he's called the King Without a Country because he just tells you everything you need to know. But I didn't like that he announced himself as the king. I am the King Without a Country. It's like, is that your brand? Like, is that you've been working on that? Have you been thinking that up? You know, if you'd said they call me the King Without a Country, that'd be fine.
Yeah, but this is like, it's like the GM said, all right, introduce yourself to the party. I am Noreg Dan. I am the King Without a Country. And the only thing he's not saying is I am a 3rd level fighter thief or something. You know, they're just leaving that bit out. But so we've got the King Without a Country. And as usual with these characters in Moorcock, he does serve a couple of purposes. One is we've got a handy guide and a source of exposition. Second is we've got a tragic character that can demonstrate the impact of chaos on a civilised, lawful society. And usually this character will also be someone to die horribly in place of our heroes to heighten the peril. In terms of Noreg Dan, we'll see, because actually he survives the book. Yeah. So he books that rule. But we will learn more about point 2 a little bit later on. And then we get another weird water-based obstacle in the frothing White River, but it doesn't really come to much. At one point, I think Noreg Dan even comments that the water is really, really bad, don't fall in. But Corum falls in and nothing really happens. So I'm sorry, but I no longer trust Noreg Dan after that nonsensical advice. But we do get a bit of cosmology from Noreg Dan in Chapter 3, who explains this realm's ruler, Zionbarg, is second in power to the big cheese Mabalode, who is, of course, the King of Swords. And if they think this plane is a bummer, just wait. Just wait till Mabalode. Well, we'll find out about that in the 3rd book, won't we?
Someone says, don't they, well, I hope we never have to go to his realm. It's like, well, there's one book left to go.
Yeah. I've got bad news for you. Yeah. And on the edge of a yawning abyss, we get our next monster encounter, which gets us into our rhythm of monster encounter, Eye of Rill. Monster encounter, Eye of Rill. And this is the Garn. And I'm just going to read a little bit about the Garn, because there's quite a funny bit of Jarry action here. And it says, a reddish shadow moved in the yellow mist. Gradually, it began to emerge. Gradually, its shape was defined. It flew upon billowing crimson wings, and its grinning face was that of a shark. It looked like something which should have inhabited the sea rather than the air, and this was confirmed by the way in which it flew, with slow undulating wings, as if through liquid. Row upon row of sharp fangs filled its red mouth, and its body was the size of a large bull, its wingspan nearly 30 feet. Out of the frightful pit it came, its jaws opening and closing, as if it had already anticipated its feast. Its golden eyes burned with hunger and rage. "It is the Garn," said Noreg Dan hopelessly. "The Garn which led the Chaos Pack upon my country. It is one of Queen Zionbarg's favourite creations. It will take us before ever our swords strike a single blow." "So you call it a Garn on this plane?" Jerry said with interest. "I've seen it before, and, as I remember, I've seen it destroyed." "How was it destroyed?" Corum asked him as the Garn flew higher and closer. That part I forget." Classic Jerry.
Jerry has read all the Moorcock books, but he hasn't really retained all the information. It's like, oh yeah, the Garn, yeah. But I don't remember the chapter on how it was dispatched. Which again is,
he doesn't edit the podcasts and he doesn't listen back to them.
I mean, it seems convenient as well that he can tell you a bit about it, but not everything about it. But I guess, if you want to kind of create a character who's sort of ageless and have lived all these different lives and stuff, is absolutely consistent with that. Of course, he's not going to be able to remember everything, but it is quite humorous that. I can't really give you any useful information.
Well, I've been here before, but, I'm not going to be any use. But pretty scary, right? It would be if the characters displayed any tension, because why bother? Because Corum just uses the eye again. So the birds from earlier tackle the Garn, and they all tumble off into the abyss. But they do consider for a moment, what happens if the birds don't kill the Garn? Does that mean the eye is useless? Well, good question. We'll find out shortly. Because the next encounter, Chaos Beastmen. So much RuneQuest / WFRP source material in this book. Right down to the descriptions.
Yeah, I read this part and I immediately pictured the Citadel miniatures like C86 Chaos Beastmen. It's just exactly that, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. They're just taken straight from the page, aren't they? Now, question for you, as a D&D guy. Now, a lot of the framework of a wilderness D&D adventure is here, random encounters, all this stuff. But did D&D ever do the Chaos Beastman thing, or was that very much RuneQuest WFRP?
I don't think it did. It feels like it should have done, because in my head it sort of mixed up with Fighting Fantasy. And like reading White Dwarf and seeing RuneQuest stuff all the time. I never played RuneQuest, but I'd just be sort of aware of a lot of this stuff. So look, thinking back and thinking of it as a whole, I'm completely familiar with it. But yeah, I don't think D&D ever had the kind of twisted chaos mutant beastmen characters. I mean, if they did, it was in an edition or a source book that I never saw.
Yeah, I mean, they took all the alignment stuff and a lot of the trappings of the adventures, didn't they? But yeah, I don't recall anything like that in D&D. I think in RuneQuest, now some RuneQuest fan out there who listens to this will probably tell me I am entirely wrong about this, but I think in RuneQuest, the Brew were basically Chaos Beastmen, weren't they? But, we've got our Chaos Beastmen, and I do like this bit, but of course, we've got a problem here because he's run out of ammo for the eye. Going to do another bit of reading, this time from the 4th chapter. And it says, what shall we do? Relina whispered. What can we do against them? Corum said nothing. Carefully keeping his balance, he drew his sword, steadying himself with his 6-fingered jewelled hand. While the Garn lived and fought the black birds, there could be no help from the netherworld. Do you hear that now? Jari said. That odd creaking? Corum nodded. With the creaking was a rumbling sound, and it was vaguely familiar. It mingled with the snorts and grunts and the bellows issuing from the yellow mist. There is naught for it, he said at length. We must go on and hope that we reach the floor of the abyss soon. At least there we shall be less exposed and able to stand and fight whatever is making that noise. They continued their cautious descent, eyes wary for the first sign of the beasts. Corum's foot had touched the floor of the abyss before he quite realised it. He had been climbing downwards for so long that he had become used to lying flat against the rock and feeling with his foot for each new step. Now there were no more steps, and you could see the ground, uneven, covered in boulders, stretching away into the yellow mist, but he could see nothing that lived. The others joined him as he peered forward. The grunts and cackles continued. An appalling stink greeted their nostrils. But the source of the sounds of the stink was not yet visible. The creaking and the rumbling also continued. Corum saw them at last. By Elric's sword, Jari groaned. Those are the chariots of chaos. I should have guessed. Monstrous lumbering chariots drawn by reptilian beasts were beginning to emerge from the mist. They were filled by a variety of creatures, some even mounted on others' backs. Each beast was a travesty of a human being. Each was clad in armour and bore a weapon of some kind. Here were pig-like, dog-like, cow-like, frog-like, horse-like things, some more deformed than others, animals warped into parodies of humanity. Did chaos turn these beasts into what they are now? Corum gasped. Jari said. You are mistaken, Corum. The king without a country spoke up. These beasts, he said, were once men. Many of them were my subjects who sided with chaos because they saw it was more powerful than law. And that transformation was their reward? Relina said in disgust. They are probably not aware of the transformation, Jari told her quietly. They have degenerated too much. They retain little memory of their former existences. The black chariots creaked closer, bearing their grunting, shrieking, bellowing crews. There was nothing for it but to turn and run from the chariots, dashing over the uneven ground, swords in hand, coughing on the stink of the Chaos Pack and the clinging yellow mist. The Chaos Pack howled in delight and whipped up their reptilian beasts, and the chariots began to move faster. The ghastly, deformed army was enjoying the hunt. Weakened by their earlier adventures and their lack of food or drink, the 4 companions could not run swiftly, and at last, behind a large boulder, they were forced to rest. The chariots rumbled on towards them, bringing the cacophony, the hellish, once-human things, the nauseating smells. Corum hoped that the chariots would pass them by, but the Chaos Pack could see more easily through the mist, and the first chariot turned towards them. Corum began to climb the boulder to get above the chariot. He struck out with his fist as a pig thing clambered after him. The fist sank into the creature's face and was held there, while the thing drew its own brass-studded club and raised its arm to finish Corum. Corum stabbed with his sword, and the pig thing shuddered, fell back. Now the others were under attack. Relina defended herself with her own sword. They stood around the base of the boulder on the opposite side to Corum while he defended their rear. A dog thing leapt at him. It wore a helmet and a breastplate, but its muzzle was full of long teeth which snapped at his arm. He swung the sword and broke that muzzle in a single smashing blow. Hands, which had turned into claws and paws, grabbed at him, tore at his cloak, his boots. Swords stabbed and clubs struck the stone at his feet as the whole mass of the creatures began to climb towards him. He stamped on fingers, hacked off limbs, drove his sword through mouths and eyes and hearts, and all the time was filled with a sickening panic, which only made him fight harder. The babble of the Chaos Pack seemed to grow louder and louder in his ears. Their chariots kept appearing out of the mist until several hundred of the things surrounded the boulder. Then it came clear to Corum that the pack did not intend at this stage to kill them. If they had wished to do so, they could have slain him and his companions by now. Doubtless they planned to torture them in some way, or perhaps turn them into the same kind of creatures they had become. Corum remembered the Mabden tortures with horror, and he fought all the harder, hoping to drive some members of the Chaos Pack to kill him. But slowly, the fearsome tide rolled in until so many corpses pressed about the base of the boulder that Corum's three friends were unable to move their arms and were trapped. Only Corum fought on, hacking all who sought to take him, and then something clambered over the rocks behind him and seized his legs, dragging him down to where Relina, Jari, and the King Without a Country stood, disarmed and bound. Oh no, they've been captured. Because, of course, no Eye of Rin. What a bummer. Now, we should point out that this exchange, which I love, is because of one of his superpowered magic items has been disabled. So we've got that new rule about the eye patch. But it also demonstrates that having these phenomenally powerful artifacts does stymie the narrative a little bit. And Mike has to come up with reasons for them not to work, just so the level of peril can be raised, and an "oh no, we've been captured" cliffhanger can occur. Can we forgive this?
Well, I certainly did back in the day. I didn't question any of it. It was just there, so I accepted it. Yeah, looking at it now, I'm a little more critical. I mean, I don't think we needed the birds. Like, the Garn is cool, and the Beastmen are cool. The birds are a little bit boring. So we could have leapt straight to that. But he's a pulp writer, and he's come from writing for magazines and these short stories and working out these increments of how these stories progress. And that was just your first session of the campaign where you just fight some birds. Maybe using the eye and the hand to defeat the birds was a little bit much, and they could have just fought them normally and then use the eye and the hand on the Garn, I suppose. But I think if this were to be adapted, you might cut out a few of these.
Yeah, I think as ever with Moorcock, everything rattles by at such a pace, I can forgive it because it never outstays its welcome. I think the eye thing is on the verge of outstaying its welcome because it's not the end of the eye business yet either. And this cliffhanger is... I like this chapter a lot because I really like the exchanges between the horse guy as well in the Chaos Beastmen, and the fact that the King Without a Country recognises him, tries to reason with him. There's some really quite tragic elements to the state that these men have found themselves in, and this is the punishment that you get meted if you turn to chaos. And this Polyb Bav has made this decision, and he says it cannot be revoked. Queen Zeombag promises us eternal life, but this is their eternal life, just to be howling creatures of madness that really don't know any joy or anything. They're just depraved creatures, and that's really quite sad. But anyway, we've got that cliffhanger, and it doesn't matter anyway, because Corum thinks, I wonder if the Garn must have been slain by now, because Horsehead Guy mentions the Garn, and Corum thinks, the Garn, I wonder if it's dead yet. And then the Hand of Quill jumps into action, breaks his bonds, he lifts the eye patch, and well, bloody hell, the Garn comes out and kills all the Chaos Beastmen. And so Moorcock contrives this situation where you can have this really effective situation of 2 or 3 pages of conversation with a victim of chaos, which is great. And it's like, right, done now, move on, let's get them all dead, thanks to the Garn. And you do get this really amusing part, which I had to laugh at. Well, it's, so they start fighting. The Garn is killing everybody. They think, right, I've got my sword, so let's scrap. It says the Chaos Pack had seized Corum again, but now he was smiling as, with a tortured screech, the Garn's great body engulfed a nearby chariot, and its strange wings wrapped themselves around the whole thing and began to crush the occupants to death. So astonished with the Chaos Beast holding Corum that he was able to tug himself free. They came after him, but he turned, and the Hand of Quill smashed into the face of one, cracked another's collarbone. He raced for Polyb Bav's chariot, The leader of the beasts had left his chariot and stood beside it, his huge horse's eyes fixed on what was happening to his companions. Before he had really noticed Corum, the prince in the scarlet robe had grabbed his sword from the pile on the floor of the chariot and aimed a blow at Polly Bav. The horseling jumped back, drawing his own sword, but his movements were dazed and clumsy. He parried, tried to stab, missed as Corum dodged aside, and received the Vadag metal in his throat. Choking, he died. From time to time, I always get struck by how Mike effortlessly conjures truly cinematic action with so few words. And in that case, the punchline is 3 words. Choking, comma, he died. But that you can instantly visualise that and how horrible it is.
Yeah.
Choking and gargling on his own blood. I absolutely love it. It's so simple, but so effective. And he was probably just tired at this point, on night 2 of his speed-driven writing bender. So he just couldn't be asked to write anything more. He was like, he's dead now.
You create this amazing horse-faced character, and he's got a sort of very, like you say, very sort of tragic story. It's like, he's there. He gives you all he's got to give, and then he's just gone. We don't really need him anymore. We get rid of him. But when you said there was an amusing part, what I was thinking was just prior to that, when the Garn returns, we get the Garn has come back. Holibav shouted in triumph, "Oh, lovely Garn, thou hast returned to us," which always amused me. The lovely Garn.
Oh yeah, poor Holibav. It's so sad to conjure something so effective just because it's probably 2 a.m. and you're running out of energy from your last baggie.
You are, after that amount of time writing and taking speed or whatever, you are seeing horse-faced men and flying sharks.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Now, are you familiar with the comic character Warlock? Marvel Comics, Adam Warlock.
Only because of Guardians of the Galaxy movie.
Right. Okay. I mean, this was sort of I think early 70s, all by Jim Starlin. It's very psychedelic, and it seems very influenced by Moorcock. The character himself is this golden, godlike character who's very humorless, but he's got this soul gem. I don't know if you can see that. He's got this black soul gem embedded into his forehead. And that's like, and it, obviously he sort of looks like Hawkmoon, and the Soul Gem has kind of a feel of Stormbringer, because sometimes it does suck, the life out of people. But one thing I remember from my childhood, because Warlock was one of the comics that was printed as a backup story in the Star Wars Weekly by Marvel UK, was where Warlock flies through space a lot. And as you can see, he's fighting a flying shark in space. And that's exactly what I pictured when reading about the Garn. And I'm positive Jim Starlin was reading Moorcock, because there's so many little references. I mean, some like completely unsubtle. Like, I think he's completely based on Hawkmoon. He acts like Elric. He's a real edgelord. But yeah, the Garn really brought it home to me how close Warlock is.
You know what? Moorcock just gets into everything, doesn't he? He gets into absolutely everything.
Yeah.
And one day, I want to ask him at some point, I want to ask him about his legendary 3-day writing benders, and whether it's just in my head canon that he's speeding his tits off for 3 days. Did I just make that up in my head, or did I read it? I'm going to ask him. One day I'm going to fucking ask him. Yeah, if I ever get to talk to him.
Email him.
But anyway.
See what happens.
Yeah. Well, I think you have to go through Linda, so I'll email Linda and say, Linda, would you mind asking Mike for me? Was he speeding his tits off when he used to write books in 3 days? Yeah, we'll see. So what's next in our journey through this doomed realm? Well, it's Chapter 4, The Frozen Army. And once again, the start of this chapter made me laugh, because the chapter's called The Frozen Army, and the first few sentences are, there were not stones, there were men. Each man a warrior, each warrior frozen like a statue with weapons in his hands. This, said Noreg Dan in quiet awe, is the Frozen Army. Just in case the chapter title didn't give it away for us. And when I read it, I remembered Loz used to summarise, going back a long time, Loz used to summarise an average Lovecraft story, like The Thing on the Doorstep. It was like, there was a thing on the doorstep. It was the thing on the doorstep. That was like, in Loz's head, that's what all Lovecraft stories were. It always made me laugh, particularly when followed by something like, "The thing is no longer on the doorstep. It's beyond it. In fact, it's in my study. Oh no, I cannot escape, ... And that's how a short story would end as well, like a 3-page short story. Fucking brilliant. Which, of course, when you think about it, actually made it into Lord of the Rings, that concept, didn't it? Oh yeah, Fellowship of the Ring. Fellowship of the Ring. Balin's Journal is a Lovecraft story, isn't it?
Drums in the Deep.
Yeah, it's totally a Lovecraft story, which in the film doubles down on that by having the last line on the book prop page sort of scrolling off and tailing downwards as though Balin is writing it right to the last moment when an orc clobbers him over the noggin. Yeah, that's right. They are coming. They're straight out of Lovecraft, that. You know what? Good enough for Tolkien, good enough for Lovecraft. That's what I reckon. Anyway, where were we? Oh yeah, Frozen Army. we do get some nice exposition here on the rules of the game, the rules of this whole law chaos stuff. There's some nice jarry exposition here. Rowena says, where is it? I heard that Queen Zeombag said that since they supported law so wholeheartedly, they should have a taste of what law aimed for. They should know the ultimate in tranquility. Oh, that's Norric Dan says that. Anyway. Rowena shivered. Is this really what law comes to? So chaos would have us believe, Jerry said. But it matters not, for the cosmic balance requires equilibrium, something of chaos, something of law, so that each stabilizes the other. The difference is that law acknowledges the authority of the balance, while chaos would deny it. But chaos cannot deny that authority completely, for its adherents know that to disobey some things is to be destroyed. Thus, Queen Zeombag dare not enter the realm of another great old god, and, as is the case of your realm, must work through others. She, like the rest, must also watch her dealings with mortals, for they cannot be destroyed by her willy-nilly. There are rules. And that's a bit of foreshadowing, that, of course, for the end of the book, isn't it? But I do like those little bits of cosmology. It continues. Corum remembered the tower where... Towel? Fuck off. Corum remembered the tower where he had found Ariok's heart. There, too, had been frozen men. Unless directly attacked, Jerry explained, Zeombag cannot kill mortals, but she can use those loyal to her to kill other mortals. She can suspend the lives of the warriors like these. So we are safe from Queen Zeombag, Corum said. If you choose to think so, Jerry smiled, you are by no means safe from her minions, and, as you have seen, she has many of those. Aye, said the king without a country feelingly. Aye, many. Holding his reins in one hand, Jerry dusted at his clothes. They were tattered and blood-stained from various flesh wounds he had sustained in the battle with the Chaos Pack. I would give much for a new suit, he murmured. I'd make a bargain with Zeombag herself. We mention that name too often, King Norric Dan said nervously as he clung to the side of the jolting chariot. We shall bring her down on us if we are not more discreet. Then the sky laughed. So Jerry accidentally summons Zeombag by bemoaning the damage to his silk loon pants. That is just class. And accidentally summons Zeombag he does. But it's cool because they have an exchange, sort of like friendly old adversaries, which is great. But not before the latest random encounter takes place. So this is random encounter 4. Well, it's not entirely random, but this might be my favourite because we get the Karmanal of Zert. So Simon, what do you make of the Karmanal of Zert?
I've read this a few times and I still couldn't quite picture exactly what the Karmanal of Zert are. And it made me think, I rushed back to my copy, my PDF copy, sadly, because I don't have the original book, of Stormbringer and the Stormbringer Companion. Because I think you've talked about this in the past. It's not like Tolkien where you've got these discrete races of creatures. You've just got these kind of random weird monsters all the time. And the monsters in Stormbringer were, I think they ran out after a while. And the Stormbringer Companion, it had, so right at the beginning of the books of Corum, you've got that wonderful passage where it goes, and I'm turning to it now. In those days, there were oceans of light. There were herds of crimson cattle that roared. There were shrill viridian things that haunted black rivers. And you've got the stats for the crimson cattle that roared and were taller than castles. And you've got the stats for the shrill viridian things. And I thought,
shrill viridian things.
They'll have the Karmanal of Zert, but I did not see the Karmanal of Zert in there. So we don't know the stats either. So, I mean, they just seem like more chaos things, but even more chaotic. Like they're not they were never humans. They just seem like the stuff of chaos, maybe.
I absolutely love them. I love them because they're weird, hopping, tentacle-headed oddities that do close harmony singing as they attack, which is just the greatest thing ever. It's such a short, simple description that it is almost impossible to envisage. But I was thinking there's an illustration in early Call of Cthulhu in the creatures section of one of the avatars of Nyarlathotep, which is like got 3 sort of trunk-like legs and waving tentacles for a head. And I just think of a gang of them that are all singing close harmony, like a close harmony choir.
Yeah.
And I just love that image. I think it's absolutely brilliant. And, sadly, we don't get a fight with them because Jari and Zionbag have their exchange, which is a bit of a pisser, really. But I really should have taken a moment to check out the Dark Side Corum supplement and see if there are stat blocks for the Karmanal Zert. So I've got to do that tonight now. I will include that in the outro of this podcast if they actually do exist in that source book. I hope they do. And if they do, I'll take a photograph and send you them. But I love the Karmanal of Zert, and it's a real shit. I am actually quite pleased that they don't attack, because I would hate to think the Karmanal of Zert ending up just as ammo for the Eye of Rin. That would be a fate that they don't deserve, in my opinion.
I like that they have no souls, no true existence. Therefore, they should not be able to harm us. I agree that logically they should not be able to harm us, but I'm afraid that they can.
Yeah, logic schmogic. Yeah. This is quite an amusing chapter because Zionbeg gets really, really shirty and tells Corum off before vanishing in a massive huff. She's like, oh no, the Karmanal of Zert, you're not going to fight them. Something much, much worse is going to happen now I realise that you killed my brother Ariok. So off she goes in a big huff. And the chapter ends with mysterious arrival of an airship and me being happy because the Karmanal of Zert are still out there, hopping and singing. Now, it turns out that when they were attacked by the Beastmen, Jari sent Whiskers off to find help, and find help he did. And he returns with, to be fair, a pretty swish airship from the city of the pyramid, which, it turns out, when he sees the steersman, is a Vadag city, the last surviving Vadag city on this plane. And we'll find out a little bit later that actually they do technically come from Corum's plane. Anyway, they escaped during the war with the Nadrag. And we found out the proper title of the city of the pyramid, which is Glas Cor Gris. Yeah. So doing my best possible, probably completely wrong Cornish pronunciation there.
Well, I did actually listen to the audio drama version of The Queen of the Swords. And they pronounce it Gulas Cor Guris. I don't know how close that is. And I'm not really sure whether there are like definitive pronunciations for Moorcock stories.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess it would all go back to how he would pronounce it himself. But
Yeah.
Gulas Cor Guris.
Yeah. I'll go with that. I don't think I'll try and say it too many more times during the course of this podcast anyway. But I went on a Cornish pronunciation website, and Guris was Gris. I'm not even going to fucking bother. I can't even pronounce English. I'm from Hull, so why would I even try and pronounce Cornish? Now, you'd think Corum would be pretty chuffed, and he does get pretty high in the situation, but only after he mansplains mechanical flight to Relina for most of a page, while they fly over weird chaos seas and dual castles and stuff. And once again, there's lots of stuff in this that has made me laugh, but this one really made me laugh. Relina says, "These people must have a powerful sorcery to make boats fly," Relina whispered to Corum. And Corum made no reply at first, for he was deep in thought, racking his memory. At last he spoke. "This is not sorcery as such," he told her. "It requires no spells and few incantations, but is instead mechanical in its nature. Certain forces are harnessed to give power to machines, some of them much more delicate than anything the Mabden could imagine, which propel such vessels through the air and do many other things. Some of the machines could once sunder the fabric of the wall between the realms and pass easily from plane to plane. My ancestors are said to have created much such machines, but most chose not to use them, preparing a different logic to their living. I dimly remember a legend which says that one sky city, that was the name they gave to their cities, left our realm altogether to explore the other worlds of the multiverse. Perhaps there was more than one such city, for I know that one did destroy itself when it went out of control during the Battle of Brogfithus, and crashed close to Castle Iran, as I told you. Perhaps another city was called Glaz Corgris and is now known as the City in the Pyramid. Prince Corum was smiling joyfully and speaking excitedly. With his mortal hand he pressed Relina's arm. "Oh, Relina, can you understand what I feel at finding that some of my race still live? That Glandith did not destroy them all?" She smiled back at him. "I think so, Corum." So I can't quite decide whether he's chuffed because the Vadak are still alive or he's chuffed because he just got to mansplain engines to Relina. But, either way, he's happy, so that's good.
He is forgetting those people in the Burning Lands who are also his race that he kills. But perhaps it's best that he does.
Yeah, what's a bit of genocide when you find out that actually they're not all dead, and there's some left? Yeah, it's all right. So on arrival at the city, we meet Prince Uret Hasdun Nuri, commander of Gulaz, I've forgotten already, and they all have dinner at a rather plush ruby table. Now, unfortunately, this beautiful city of gardens, restaurants, and, much to Jari's delight, tailors and haberdasheries, is close to falling, and their powers to defend against Zionbag's host are fading, and Corum's plan to take them back and help defend Luamanesh isn't really a goer, as they lack the precious materials on that plane to take the city back to that of Corum and Co. Now, was this always the plan? Was the plan always to go and get the city of the pyramid and bring it back to help the defence of Luamanesh? I can't really remember. Or is this just something that's hastily cooked up? Right, okay, that's fine. I sometimes find this period in Moorcock like watching a Bond film. I've got no idea why Big Rog leaves Venice, for example, and goes to Brazil to ride a cable car. But he fights Jaws on top of it, so whatever. And we're getting a little bit of that here. Anyway, Prince Uret says that they have enough kit to send just one ship through the wall between worlds, so they decide to hop it back to Luamanesh to see if they can grab the necessaries to enable the whole city to make the trip if they survive the gathering attack from Zionbag and Co. We don't really find out what this material is. Normally, when you go into quest mode, you get some kind of MacGuffin, but all we know is it's some kind of materials. But it's cool. We know they've got a shopping list, and that's fine. It says they slept, they ate, and their tattered, battered clothes were copied by the tailors and armsmiths of Gulas Korgurs, so that when they awoke they found themselves with fresh raiment identical to that which they had worn upon starting out on their quest for the city. Jari Akonel was particularly pleased by this example of the city's hospitality, and when, at last, they were invited to attend upon Prince Uret, he expressed that gratitude roundly. "The skyship is ready," said Prince Uret gravely. "You must go quickly now, for Queen Zionbag, I learn, mounts a great attack upon us." "Will you be able to withstand it with your power weakened?" Jari asked. "I hope so." The king without a country stepped forward. "Forgive me, Prince Uret, but I would stay here with you. If law is to battle chaos in my own realm, then I would battle with it." Uret inclined his head. "It shall be as you wish. Now hurry, Prince Corum. The skyship awaits you on the roof. Stand on that mosaic circle there and you will be transported to the ship. Farewell." They stood within the mosaic circle on the prince's floor and, a heartbeat later, were once again upon the deck of the ornate flying craft. The steersman was the same who had first greeted them. "I am Bwydith Ahorn," he said. "Please sit where you sat before and cling tightly to the rail." "Look," Corum pointed beyond the green pyramid out across the black plain. The huge shape of Queen Zionbag could be seen again, her face alive with fury, and beneath her there marched a vast army, a foul army of fiends. Then the skyship had entered the air and sailed through the dark green oval into a world which rang with the voices of the fiends, and over all these voices sounded the hideous, vengeful laughter of Queen Zionbag of Chaos. "Before I merely toyed with them because I enjoyed the game, but now that they harbour the destroyer of my brother, they will perish in black agony." The air began to vibrate. A green globe of light now encircled the ship. The city in the pyramid, the army of hell, Queen Zionbag, all faded. The ship rocked crazily up and down. The moaning increased in pitch until it became a painful whine, and then they had left the realm of Queen Zionbag and came again to the realm of Arkin of Law. They sailed over the land of Luamanesh, and it was not very different from the world they had just left. Chaos, here too, was on the march. The end of Book 2. Will we find out what happens next? Yes, because we're going to do Book 3 as well, because it's really short, so that's good. That's quite convenient, isn't it? Book 3, in which Prince Corum and his companions wage war, win a victory, and wonder at the ways of law. Now, this is a good one, I think, chapter 1 of book 3. It's good stuff. It gets your blood rushing. It's a real switch in tone. It's very grim. It's violent. It's apocalyptic. Flying over the countryside, they see slaughtered animals, families, rivers choked with the dead. And Corum does some proper hero stuff. Staring stuff from the Eternal Champion, risking it all to save a family and take out some frustration on sweaty, evil pony tribesmen. But I've got to say at this point, had we done this in 2 parts, or a part 2 and a part 3, and come back to this, I would have missed just how massive a swing in tone you get from the psychedelic elements of book 2 and tentacled, hopping, close harmony singing, weird chaos monsters to dead families, rivers choked with dead people, references to the pony tribes engaging in murder and rapine. And it's a really, really wild swing, isn't it?
Yeah. This is more your sort of traditional European Fantasyland, grungy. It's a bit like that Warhammer, old world. The previous book, it's almost like the quintessential chaos landscape, because you've got that sort of unchanging. I think that appears in a few other stories. I think there's an Elric short story where he goes to some sort of chaos land and it's all like completely featureless and that sort of thing. Yeah, like you say, very psychedelic. But yeah, we're back in the mud and the dirt and the filth now, aren't we?
Yeah, and you get the same in the Hawkmoon books, don't you? You get descriptions of pyramids of naked, dead men, women, and children. Just a few pages apart from the throbbing bridge. And it's I think it's one of the reasons probably why Moorcock was popular, because you got that combination of stoner madness and really gritty, grim, hard-edged, high-stakes fantasy. Yeah. The other good thing about this is we get to see Corum do real, proper hero stuff, because we're sailing over this land and he's seeing all this stuff and he's advised against it by the steersman, but he sees a farmer with a rusty, battered sword about to defend himself from a load of pony tribesmen and try and defend his family who fled into the farmhouse. And Elric says, take us down, and he risks everything to save a family and take out some of his frustration on this sweaty gang of evil pony tribesmen. And you get some really good quality Moorcock action with people being split from shoulder to breastbone and all that good stuff. Yeah. And they do successfully save this family. And we also found, I nearly said Elric there, but Corum gets to show a different range of emotions in this chapter. He displays outrage and anger. Over the course of this book, I think Corum actually shows more range emotionally than your average Eternal Champion character tends to do. And this is a really fantastic passage where essentially Relina observes him almost losing his shit. And it says, Corum spat down on the horde, the stench of chaos now strong again in his nostrils. His mortal eye changed to burning black with an iris of flaming gold as his anger seized him, and he spat a second time on the flowing violence below. He made a noise in his throat, and his hand went to the hilt of his sword as he remembered all his hatred of the madman who had slain his family and maimed him. He saw the banner of King Lear abroad, a crude, tattered thing bearing the sign of the dog and the sign of the bear. He sought to find his great enemy, El Glanditha Cray, amongst the ranks. Relina called, Corum, do not waste your strength now. Calm yourself and save your energy for the fight which must yet come. He sank upon the seat, his mortal eye slowly fading back to its original colour. He panted like one of the dogs that marched below, and the jewels covering his faceted alien eye seemed to shift and glitter with a different rage from his own. Relina shivered when she saw him thus, with hardly any trace of the mortal about him. He was like some possessed demigod of the darkest legends of a people, and her love of him turned to terror. A great little passage, that. I really love the idea of Corum just at the railing at the side, just absolutely raging and spitting on the pony tribesmen below him, just out of pure anger. Great stuff. So in chapter 2, we find out that in this city of terrified citizens and exhausted warriors, they meet with King Ernald, who reveals that Zionbag's herald is Prince Gain of the Damned. Now, we're finally, I think this is our 74th episode, and we'll finally meet Gain of the Damned for the first time. And he's probably the closest thing we have to an eternal antagonist for the Eternal Champion. And he'll return many, many times over the next 50 or so years after this book was written, because this was written in 71. In this and a variety of other guises, like Paul Minkt, I think, is one of his later guises as well. And he's also a big presence in the comic adaptations because he's just such a cool-looking character that artists must really, really dig drawing. The Walt Simonson Prince Gain of the Damned is absolutely fantastic. So I love seeing him on the page. What do you make of Gain of the Damned as a villain?
In the day, he was just another of these kind of terrifying chaos knights, like chaos warriors. Reading it this time, I'm sort of thinking he doesn't feel coded as it, but is he the Eternal Champion? Because is he Ericos? Because they talk about he's got this tragic backstory, where he fell in love and something went terribly wrong, and he just wiped out his people. And when Corum defeats him, he's got this sequence where his face changes, and one of the Corum catches a glimpse of his own face in the helmet, and it doesn't seem explicit here, but there's got to be a link between him and Ericos, right? It's almost the same description. He's this kind of terrible, tormented, doomed creature that, you know, is got to eternally answer for his, you know, terrible, terrible crimes. But I never got that reading it back in the day. I just thought, oh, he's another of these kind of chaos lieutenants, you know. But he does seem so much more than that. And I just read the Elric books, the Corum books, the Hawkman books, and like the 2 Ericos books that were out, you know, in the late 80s. And I never returned. So my knowledge of Gaynor is sort of limited to this book. And I think there's one of the Elric short stories, maybe he appears. So I'd almost sort of forgotten about him. I'd not known how important he was in the sort of later multiverse stories.
Yeah. So I think because you read these books in such a wild order when you're young, and they're all over the place. He's in Revenge of the Rose in the 80s, and the Elric novel. He's in the second Corum trilogy. He's part of the Army of the Cold Folk. And I've just found the bit actually in chapter 3, which I'd missed. It says, there was the Army of Chaos itself, misshapen warriors like those they had met earlier in the Yellow Abyss, led by a tall horseman in dazzling plate armour which clothed him from head to foot, doubtless the messenger of Queen Zionbag, of whom they had heard. So yeah, you're absolutely right. He is coded as like a failed version of the Eternal Champion. And the clue is there when, and I'll read that bit a little bit later, when Corum thinks for a split second he sees his own face when all these different faces are flashing by. It's almost like he's undergoing a Time Lord regeneration or something after Corum defeats him before he vanishes and leaves behind an empty suit of armour. But I absolutely think Gaynor is such an interesting character and such a tragic character because he's a version of the Eternal Champion that basically failed and failed the balance and was doomed to serve chaos pretty much for all eternity. And that's a really kind of terrible fate. Ericos thinks he's got a bad hand of cards, but actually you're absolutely right. You could even argue that the ultimate fate of Ericos, before you read Quest for Tanalorn, which undoes this, you could argue that Ericos' ultimate destination is to become Gain of the Damned.
Yeah.
But then, of course, Quest for Tanalorn in the late 70s, Moorcock attempts to tie everything up with a relatively neat bow, which kind of suggests that's probably not the case. But I prefer to not include Quest for Tanalorn, the very end, in my head canon of the Eternal Champion. I really like the idea that Gain of the Damned is this failed version of the Eternal Champion, and Corum, without that knowledge of who he is effectively fighting himself, and seeing that flash of his own face under the helmet is a real shock. But even then, he doesn't quite get it. I think it's terrific.
Gaynor's got good dialogue. He doesn't talk like a villain. He talks like a kind of defeated, broken character, like almost like he's not going to bother, but he still does because he's compelled to. He has to. But I love some of his dialogue. He's I've got no honour. Maybe I've got fear, but that's all.
Yeah, it's brilliant because, Corum throws down his... Well, of course, before we get to that, we have to think, Corum commits. He says, yes, I will take on Gain of the Damned, because they meet Lord Arkin. They give Arkin the shopping list. And Arkin says, oh, yeah, don't worry, I'll get this stuff. So this is why we don't have a MacGuffin, because they're not even going to collect this gear. Arkin just says, yeah, I'll go and get it. I'll go get the list of stuff needed to bring the city of the pyramid back over to this plane. But Arkin tells Corum that Gaynor is a tough nut to crack, effectively invulnerable, but he, and only he, can defeat him. So Corum commits to it, and at this point we think, right, okay, so how on earth is this going to work? With 2 chapters left, effectively, or 3 chapters left, how is Corum going to fight his way through this Chaos Army to get to the Gain of the Damned? Well, actually, it turns out to be really easy. They just sneak into the camp and walk right up to him. It's really easy. It put me in mind of a certain YouTube channel where he said, well, that's going to be hard, isn't it? No, it's going to be super easy, barely an inconvenience. And that's exactly what happens. They just basically sneak into the camp and walk straight up to him. I mean, we are 120 pages into a Moorcock book after all, so we can't hang about. It is great, though, because Corum throws down his challenge and Gaynor is wonderfully honest about how he has no interest in the rabble around him. He has no regard for chivalry, honour, or anything else other than carrying out Zionbag's wishes, because he doesn't want the punishment he'll be in for if he fails. He's a truly, truly tragic character. It's fantastic. He does arouse the Chaos Beastmen to kill the intruders, but naturally, Corum, it's our final use of the eye. And it's not. There's still one to come. This is the penultimate use of the eye, which I think is now the 4th or 5th use of the eye of Rin. Yeah. Corum calls up his own beastmen thanks to the eye from the last battle, and a colossal melee ensues around them between Gaynor's beastmen and Corum's dead beastmen. And in the middle of all this carnage, which again is super cinematic and a wonderful image of all these beastmen, dead and alive, falling upon each other, and dead beastmen dragging their booty back into the shadow realm, screaming, whilst Corum and Gaynor go at each other. And for a change, Moorcock really takes his time over this fight, and it's wonderful. It's an exhausting combat over 2 or 3 pages that ends on a cliffhanger with Gaynor after the upper hand, about to strike that killing blow on Corum. And it's fucking fantastic. Gaynor's only been around for 1 chapter and is already one of the best antagonists in all of Moorcock, just based upon the explanation that Jari gives at the beginning of the chapter about who he is, because Jari says he too fought on the side of law, but then he fell in love with something. Perhaps it was a woman, and became a renegade, thrown in his lot with chaos. He was punished, some say, by the power of the balance. Now he may never serve law or know the pleasure of law. Now he must serve chaos eternally, just as you, eternally, serve law. Eternally? Corum said, disturbed. I'll speak no more of that, Jari said. But you sometimes know peace. Prince Gaynor only remembers peace and can never, throughout all the ages, expect to find it again. And that's a pretty tragic character. But does he slay Corum? Well, of course not, because there are 4 more Corum books. So we know that's not going to happen. There's 1 more in this trilogy, for heaven's sake. So let alone the second trilogy. So chapter 4, well, the Hand of Quill comes back again. The Hand of Quill is having none of it. So it grabs Gaynor's sword, bonks him over the head with its pommel, which I thought was pretty funny, and begins to tear open his visor, much to Gaynor's desperate horror, and he pleads with Corum for mercy, but to absolutely no avail. Corum is having none of it, and Corum is pretty ruthless at this point, which, is probably fair. But then we get that section which you mentioned, which I think is brilliant. It says, the Hand of Quill wrenched for a 3rd time at the visor, and it came away. Corum stared at a youthful face which writhed as if composed of a million white worms. Dead red eyes peered from the face, and all the horrors Corum had ever witnessed could not compare with the simple, tragic horror of that visage. He screamed, and his scream blended with that of Prince Gaynor the Damned as the flesh of the face began to putrefy and change into a score of foul colours, which gave off a more pungent stench than anything which had issued from the Chaos Pack itself. As Corum watched, the face changed its features. Sometimes it was the face of a middle-aged man. sometimes the face of a woman, sometimes that of a boy, and once, fleetingly, he recognised his own face. How many guises had Prince Gaynor known through all the eternity of his damnation? Corum saw a million years of despair recorded there, and still the face writhed, still the red eyes blazed in terror and agony, still the features changed and changed and changed and changed. More than a million years, aeons of misery, the price of Gaynor's nameless crime, his betrayal of his oath to law, a fate imposed upon him not by law but by the power of the balance. What crime could it have been if the neutral cosmic balance had been required to act? Some suggestion of it appeared and disappeared in the various features that flashed within the helm, and now Corum did not grip Gaynor's neck, but instead cradled the tormented head in his arms, and wept for the Prince of the Damned who had paid a price, was paying a price, which no being should ever have to pay. Here, Corum felt as he wept, was the ultimate injustice, or the ultimate in injustice. Both seemed at that moment to be the same. And now, Prince Gaynor was not dying. He was merely undergoing a transition from one existence to another. Soon, in some other distant realm, far from the 15 planes and the realms of the sword rulers, he would be doomed to continue his servitude to chaos. At last the face disappeared, and the flashing armour was empty. Prince Gaynor the Damned was gone. This is one of the best villain denouements in all of fantasy for me. I absolutely love it.
Yeah, absolutely. This should be the end of the book.
Yes, I was thinking exactly that, because the rest of the close does get a little bit janky for me, especially when the king without a kingdom turns up and gives him a ray gun, which I thought was a bit out there. So you've got King Lear and Broad. Well, before that happens, of course, and Gaynor will be back, of course, because he's too good a villain to waste. Corum and Jari hightail it back to the city in time for the big attack. And without Gaynor and the Chaos Beastmen, the fight is perhaps a bit more even, but it's still a grim experience, even with the arms of the dog and the bear held in reserve by King Lear of the Mabden. But Arkin comes back with a shopping, and Corum dispatches the skyship back to Zeombag's realm. And in the last chapter, everything rattles to a close with a combination of epic action, which is great, as Corum strides alone down an avenue towards the city gate as it falls in, smashed in by the army of the bear and the army of the dog, which is a brilliant image. Just him alone on this avenue, watching them all at the end of the avenue. And he uses the eye, for the last time this time, to summon up the last lot of dead Chaos Beastmen, those of Gaynor, slain in his camp. And it's all on again. Great stuff. But not enough. But it's okay, because the skyship arrives. The king without a kingdom gives him a ray gun. He kills King Lear with it. So Lear and Broad, this massively terrifying character that was built up in book one, with Whiskers watching from the rafters as he does horrific things to people. He just shoots him dead with a ray gun. and then all his blokes as well. He just shoots them down. And then Zeombag arrives behind the city of the pyramid in the sky and grows to massive size. And then Lord Arkin grows massive and fights Zeombag in the sky and defeats her because he baited her into his gaff where he's stronger and the day is won, hooray. Apart from the bit on the avenue where he faces down the army of the dog and the army of the bear, those last 3 pages are a bit wacky racist for me.
Yeah, I do like that the king has such a ignominious death. He just basically points the thing at him. And there's not even a description of, like, it's not a flame lance. It's just nothing happens, but he just dies. It's like he turns him inside out and he just drops dead, and that's it. And he deserves it. It's fine. But I think it would have been more effective just placing the episode with Gaynor, like, in this section right at the end. That's the final villain. Because Zeombag, she's his constant presence. We don't really get a lot of her, and we don't really get to know her. She's just sort of in the sky and angry.
The best bit for Zeombag is just the exchange with Jari, where she says, "I prefer you as a man," and he says, "Yeah, I prefer you as a woman." Yeah, and she also refers to Jari as Master Timoras. Yeah, and she's flirting with him. She's saying, Master Timoras, I prefer you as a man. Yeah, it's good stuff, all that. So, yeah, I mean, we get this weird, convenient bit of Deus Ex Machina from Arkin. Okay, there's that bit where we realise that she was so outraged that the city of the pyramid had escaped, she followed it through and broke her own cardinal law of travelling to the realm of another of the great old gods and trying to directly intervene rather than use her powers, and that's how Arkin defeats her and basically takes the sword off her and banishes her. But yeah, the whole ray gun bit, yeah. I think at this point, 3 days of hardcore speed binge, and expending all of his creative energy on that brilliant Gain of the Damned chapter. I think he's definitely exhausted himself by that point. But we do get a nice little epilogue.
They've got flying ships, they've got flying cities. Why not ray guns, I suppose? And it's this sort of yet another sort of baffling thing that no one can understand. But yeah, to us, it just feels like he's got a laser rifle.
But you're absolutely right. It's not even satisfying because he's given this thing which is like a lump with a spade-like grip, and he's told, just point it. And, just point it and press that button, and things in front of you will drop down dead. And he does that, and that's it. That is what happens. He points at him, and there's no description of impact. There's no description of what it actually does. It just says, oh yeah, and King Lear just dropped down dead. And then his men were like, oh, and they charge Corum, and he does the same to them, and they drop down dead. It's not very satisfying, is it?
Yeah.
Yeah. But we do get a nice little epilogue because, of course, other than the scene in the temple, once again, probably one of my favourite chapters in this whole sequence, which is Whisker's adventure in Mabdenland. We've not really seen anything of Glanditha Cray, but we get this nice little epilogue where it says, Glanditha Cray was weary, as were his men. The charioteers were massed behind him. From the cover of the hill he had witnessed the confrontation between Queen Zionbag and Lord Arkin, and he had seen his folk destroyed by the Vadag Shefenau in their sorcerous flying craft. For many months he had sought Corum Hale and Sea, and that ghast of a renegade, the Margravine Relina. And at last he had turned from his search to join the main army in its attack upon Howlig van Neek, only to witness the sudden defeat of the Mabden horde and its allies. El Glandeth glowered. It was he who was the outlaw now, he who must hide and scheme and no fear, for the Vadag had returned, and law ruled all. At last, as night fell, and the world was illuminated by the strange green glow from the monstrous sorceress city, Glandith ordered his men to go back along the road they had travelled, back to the sea, into the dark forests of the northeast. And he vowed that he would yet find an ally strong enough to destroy Corum and all that Corum loved. And he believed he knew whom to summon. He believed he knew. This ends the second book of Corum. So that was it. We've done it. We've done Queen of the Swords, despite all challenges that have tried to get in our way. We have completed the Queen of the Swords. Thoughts on Queen of the Swords?
Yeah, not as good as Knight of the Swords, but yeah, I reading it again, recently, I found a lot more to appreciate in it. I think at the time, I think when I first read it, and also I read them all again maybe 15 years ago, and I was a little bit disappointed by the second 2 books because I think that first book is so brilliant. It's so exciting and strange, and like I was saying, it's got that sort of Jack Vance quality to it. The second one is marking time a little bit. Zionbag doesn't really emerge as a character, really. I mean, similar with Ariot, but with Ariot you've got just such a kind of stupendous description of him in his hall with the kind of little people crawling all over him. You don't quite get the same thing with the Zionbag, and Zionbag, we hardly knew you. She's there and then she's gone. But obviously, as you say, we get Gain of the Damned, and we get the kind of Chaos Beast Men, and we get a lot of little sort of adventures. It does feel like a series of little bits, and some of the bits are better than others. And I think if you were adapting it, you would lose some of those bits and keep the best ones, and maybe combine a few of them. I mean, even with her being sort of defeated at the end, that is sort of suggested through the book. It's sort of, when you get to that part, it makes perfect sense because they've laid it in the dialogue that if that were to happen, she'd be finished. But yeah, it does feel a little bit like a weak second chapter, kind of building up to the kind of big final chapter.
Yeah, I do wonder, and this is probably wrong, but I do wonder if you've got this super powerful female chaos god, and all she does is stand in the sky, like effectively at the top of the stairs, shouting downwards and getting really angry, apart from the moment where she flirts with Jari. Is it because it's a female character that he's struggling to write it? Because he can certainly write a gluttonous, corpulent villain, and that's what Ariok basically is in the first one, and he likes his gluttonous, corpulent villains. You know, we've got one in Phoenix and Obsidian, which we're looking at the moment. We had one in Fortress of the Pearl. He likes all that stuff, but I think by his own admission, he struggled to write female characters at this point in his career, and he tried to redress that with the adventures of Catherine Cornelius and Una Persson in the 20th century, or whatever it was called. It was a long, unwieldy title. And I don't know, it just feels like there was such a good opportunity there. Instead of having 3 chapters where it's use the eye, rinse, repeat, use the eye, rinse, repeat, actually have some interaction with Zionbag. Because when he writes dialogue with Jari, and the little bit of flirtation between Jari and Zionbag is amusing, I want more of that. You know, I want more of that and less random, you know, with the exception of the close harmony singing tentacle head beasts. They can stay. Yeah. The Garn can stay. The Chaos Beastmen can stay. Get rid of all the other extraneous bits. I think it's one of the symptoms of these things being written in 3 days, and there being no real self-editing or rearrangement of things. But despite that, I think it's still a cracking read. When it's good, it's great. And the bits that aren't so great don't last long before you're back onto the great stuff again, which is really how all this stuff worked at that time, and what made them so easy to read. Because you knew that just round the corner, after maybe a bum note, there's something great coming. Yeah. And it's just on this occasion, the really, really fantastic bit happens just before a slightly bum note. Whereas, you know, that really should have been the climax, you know, which you mentioned already.
Yeah. I mean, could Zeonbog have been Gain of the Damned, or Gain of the Damned have been Zeonbog? I mean, I get that what he's doing, he's make her as different from Ariok as possible. So rather than this kind of disgusting, corpulent, you know, gross thing, it's this very beautiful, majestic creature. But you know, you just don't get that much of her. And maybe you could have combined those two. But I do have to tell you a story which this book always makes me think of, and it's based on the end of this book. So I'm going to take you back to when I was doing my GCSE art, and there were only a handful of us doing graphics. They called it graphics, but we really wanted to be book illustrators. We really wanted to do the covers to Moorcock books. Me and my friend, we were both like, this was the prime time we were like absolutely entrenched in this stuff. And so we finally got a project where we were to do a book cover and a few interior illustrations. And I did the History of the Rune stuff, and my friend chose Queen of the Swords. And my art teacher at the time, she hated fantasy art. So she was angry from the get-go that we were doing these books. But that was all we cared about. That's all we wanted to do. And the thing she hated even more than fantasy art was what she called second-hand reference. So she thought if you're going to paint something or draw something, you have to do it it has to be in front of you. You can't use photographs. She absolutely, you know, would fly off the handle if you'd drawn something from a photograph. And my friend, for his book cover, he did the face of Zeonbag in the sky with the green city in the pyramid flying in front of her, and she's there, and she's got a kind of wild red hair and just kind of glaring eyes. And the teacher looks at this picture and she goes, "Who's this then? You didn't use a photograph, did you?" And he goes, "No." He goes, "Who's it a painting of then?" And he goes, "Oh, my mum." And I'd met his mum. She did not look like Zeonbag. And what he'd basically done is Carol Decker from T'Pau he copied out, I think, even the cover of the Tapao album that was out at the time. So, Carol Decker's got amazing hair, but she was transformed into Zionbug. So I do always kind of think of Zionbug as Carol Decker. That I was waiting to get to the end of that book, and I mean, obviously, it's not my story. My friend should be telling this story, but he's not here, so I've co-opted it. But the thing that eternally stays in my memory for Queen of the Swords.
Well, I'm quite jealous in a way that you've got like an idea in your head of what Zionbag looks like, because the character is in many ways so poorly drawn. I can't even really summon up an image in my mind of what this enormous god-like creature that basically only has two modes, anger or flirting. It didn't really work for me. And it's a shame that.
There's a fantastic cover, with the old door ones where she's in the sky, looking beautiful, looking like this sort of Indian goddess.
There's the Bob Haberfield cover, isn't there? And there's also was it the Brothers? No, it wasn't the Brothers Hildebrandt, was it? There's one which is quite stylized, which looks like 60s pop art, where she's got the huge flowing red. Yeah. Sorry, it's like a cross between like sort of 1930s art, like an absinthe advert from a poster, and pop art, where she's got the huge flowing red hair, which I think is a great cover as well. But
I'm blanking on the name of the artist, but I know the one you mean.
I'm got to go and have a look now. I've got it somewhere in a pile, hiding somewhere. But you know what? Enjoyable enough, and enough to keep me interested to see what Glandith O'Crea can cook up for the King of Swords. Because one thing that I'm realising as I'm reading these is, I thought I might have said this when we talked about Knight of the Swords, but I always thought I'd read these more recently than a lot of the other Moorcock we've covered and I've reread. But it's very much the second Corum trilogy that I've reread more than once since the 80s. And that was always the trilogy that I always thought was the better one. But on rereading them about 7 or 8 years ago, I'm not entirely sure I feel that way anymore. There are great things in the second trilogy, like the Cold Folk, the Foy Mayor, and all that stuff. The setting's brilliant. A lot of the antagonists are really interesting. But the whole quest mode angle gets really, really tiresome in those books. In the setup, quest in the middle, resolve things at the end, becomes really super formulaic. And whilst we are bemoaning the fact that we don't get more time with Zionbag, I am glad that it didn't just mirror the first book in that, first part in Luanesh, second part psychological road trip, third part find our way to Zionbag's castle and defeat her. So I appreciate that there's something different going on. I appreciate that although the structure's broadly the same, the actual climax is handled differently, and we get all of that quite grim, gritty war scenario. I think that works really well. I love the fact that Corum gets to display some real heroism in saving normal people, which we didn't really get in the first one because he's just angry at men all the time. So he's showing some growth. He's actually on an arc. His relationship with Relina, even though Relina's in this entire book, what does she do other than get mansplained engines by Corum? She doesn't get a whole lot to do other than just be there and stroke his head when he's upset. Yeah, it does show a little bit of development. So I'm really looking forward to doing the third one. I think it'll be good.
So it takes an upward swing. I think there's better stuff in the third one. The second trilogy, I've got barely any memory of. I read them back in the 80s, not read them since. And apart from the very beginning of it, where he goes into sort of Celtic land, can't really. So I will have to reread those as well. But this trilogy is. I think it's my favourite Moorcock sequence. As much as I love all the Hawkmoon books and the Elric books that were out at the time, it does feel like it is one story. As episodic and bitty as it can sometimes be.
Yeah. So far for me, it is more consistently strong than the Hawkmoon books, certainly. The Hawkmoon books have got great things in them. I think it's hard to compare them with the Elric stories because they're all over the place in terms of when they were written and how the narrative works and how the writing style changes. So I would never try and compare anything with the Elric sequence just because it's so all over the place. Not just in terms of, I'm not going to say in terms of quality because I like it all to one degree or another, but in terms of consistency. So yeah, I think as a trilogy, this is so far for me, and I'm hoping it continues with Night of the Swords, a really, really strong trilogy, and certainly as strong as anything he wrote in the 60s and 70s. Yeah, good stuff. All right, well, thank you for braving the absolute shit show, not only of scheduling, but of technology that we've had this evening, because, you know, won't go into detail, but just for listeners' sake, what a fucking ball ache the technology has been this evening. But thanks for playing out.
All right. Well, I will look forward to doing King of the Swords. Hopefully we can get that one sorted without as many delays, and get
you know
into
what?
it.
It can't get any harder or worse than this one was. So I think we can. I think we've turned a corner. We've turned a corner, and I'm probably saying that because I'm 2 pints of Daffy's gin and tonic down, so I'm just naturally feeling optimistic. All right, dude. Thanks again, and catch you next time.
All right. Take care.
Massive thanks to Simon for sticking with me through not only scheduling issues but also a boatload of IT problems when we finally did get down to recording. Check out Can I Pod with Madness. It's hosted on Podbean, but it's available on all the usual podcatchers. Following our discussion, I did check the Dark Side Corum RPG supplement and, sadly, it does not contain any stats or images regarding the Karmanal of Zert. I also hopped onto interwebs and, whilst I didn't find a satisfactory visualisation of our harmonising chaos friends, I did find a song called Karmanal of Zert on Bandcamp by a band called Blaze Atoms. A powerful name. The track appears to have been a demo and doesn't have lyrics, although you can read them on their Bandcamp page. I'll pop a link to the page in the show notes, and I'm going to play this show out with The Karmanal of Zert by Blaze Atom. Finally, thanks as always to our patrons for keeping this show on the road. First, those without tier: Anthony Piconti, Tim Cardos, Dave Dempster, and Sebastian Weetabix. And to our Chaos Engineers, Andrew Cicluna, Andrew Van Ness, Anthony Porter, Benjamin Fletcher, Bill O'Cat, Brandon Mays, Craig Ledley, Dave Griffiths, Dave Voxman, Gabriel Laycock, Harvey Faulkner Aston, Jim Kirkland, Jim Knight, John W. Lays, Jules Lawrence, Mal Pertwee, Mary Catherine, Matt Saltz, Nelbert, Ofer Ziv, Paul McRandall, PJ Cooper, Scott Butler, and, of course, Simon Perrins. And, all new to the Don Blast, Andrew Spong. Andrew sent me a visual guide to why he'd taken an interest in Breakfast in the Ruins, and suffice to say, it involved a complete set of Millennium hardcovers, a Bolt Thrower t-shirt, and a frankly magnificent fridge of beer. Thanks, Andrew. And of course, thanks to our crafty Jugaderos, Alexander Harris, Eliel Westenra, Loz, Taylor, Matthew Broom, Graham Holden, and Toby White. And finally, eternal thanks to our patron demons: Tone Malazzo, Alistair Davison, Andy Clark, Andy Darby, David Lee, Fred Quiche, Gareth Wilson, Glenn Sawyer, Greg Faulkner, Gwen Barlow, Ian Stead, Imria, Jenny Stim, Jason Vogel, Jay Reeser, Joe Monty, Lee Gary, Mark Hebden, Marius Latauskas, Miles Reed-Labato, Neil Burton, Paul Hillary, Randall Gatlin, Steve Round, Tom Murphy, the OG patron Norman Beresford, and last, but of course, never least, Robert McMillan. Right, enough from me. Don't forget you can follow us on Twitter and Instagram with the handle @BreakfastRuins. You can email us at breakfastruins@outlook.com. The webpage is breakfastintheruins.com. BITR Breakfast in the Ruins Radio is live on Radio Garden or via the web player at breakfastintheruinsradio.blogspot.com. We have our Patreon page too. There are a few extra odds and sods on there. But for now, take care, stay safe, and we will meet again soon on the Moonbeam Roads.
Thank you.